The apartment still smelled faintly like my dad. Coffee grounds, aftershave, old wood soaked with memories. I hadn't been back since the funeral, and stepping inside felt like opening a window into a life that wasn't mine anymore. Dust floated in the sunlight like quiet ghosts. I told myself I was only staying for a few weeks, long enough to pack his things, maybe repaint the walls, decide what to do next. But the truth was, I didn't have anywhere else to go. The city felt too loud, too bright, and somehow this apartment, his apartment, felt like the only place I could still hear him breathe. The knock on the door startled me. When I opened it, I saw him. Mark. He smiled a little, almost shyly, hands in the pockets of his leather jacket. Hey Eli. I heard you were back. I hadn't seen him in years, maybe since college. My dad's best friend, the one who always came around to fix something, the one who stayed late after barbecues talking on the porch. I used to fall asleep to the sound of their laughter. Now, seeing him alone in the doorway, I realized how much time had moved through both of us. His hair was shorter, touched with gray at the temples, and the lines around his eyes looked deeper, not harsh, just lived in. I thought I'd check in, he said. Your dad would have wanted someone too. Yeah. Thanks. I stepped aside. Come in. He looked around as if walking through a memory too. Place hasn't changed much. No, I said, trying to sound casual. I think he liked it that way. He smiled, but it faded quickly. He did. For a few minutes we just stood there. The silence between us felt familiar, almost comforting. He asked if I'd eaten. I hadn't. He disappeared to the kitchen like he'd never stopped coming here. I followed, leaning on the counter while he made coffee. His movements were easy, practiced. He still stirred it the same way, slow, careful circles that didn't quite reach the edge of the cup. Watching him, I was hit with a wave of something strange, nostalgia maybe, or the ache of seeing someone who remembered a part of me I'd forgotten. He handed me a mug. You planning to stay long? I shrugged. Not sure yet. Depends what feels right. He nodded. That's fair. We talked, small talk mostly. How the neighborhood had changed, the bakery that closed, the new bookstore down the street. Every now and then his gaze would drift to me, and when it did, it lingered just a little too long. Not uncomfortable exactly, but waited, like he was seeing something new or maybe trying to. When he mentioned my dad, his voice softened. He was proud of you, you know. Always talked about you. I didn't know what to say. My throat tightened and I just nodded, staring into the steam rising from my cup. He changed the subject then, offering to help fix the flickering light above the sink. I told him I could handle it, but he insisted, half smiling like he used to. I fetched a stool and he climbed up, reaching for the fixture. His shirt lifted slightly as he stretched, revealing a trace of skin above his jeans. I looked away quickly, embarrassed by the flicker of awareness that ran through me. Still got a stubborn bulb, he said, twisting it loose. Your dad used to curse at this thing. He cursed at everything, I said, laughing softly. True. The light came on suddenly, bright and clean, and for a moment, his face was illuminated, lined but warm. He looked down at me, still holding the bulb, and smiled. It wasn't a big smile. Just enough to show the corners of his eyes, the quiet fondness there. Something in my chest shifted. I looked away first. Thanks for that. Anytime. He climbed down slowly, his hand brushing my shoulder as he passed. Maybe it was an accident. Maybe not. Either way, my pulse jumped. He gathered his jacket, hesitating near the door. You need anything, tools, groceries, whatever, you know where I am. Same building, 5B. Still there? I asked. Still there, he said, smiling. Guess I'm not good at leaving places behind. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Before he stepped out, he turned back just slightly and looked at me. Not a quick glance. A full, quiet look that made time stretch thin. His eyes weren't pitying or nostalgic. They were searching. And in that silence, something passed between us, something I didn't have words for. He cleared his throat. Good night, Eli. Night, I said softly. The door closed behind him, but the room didn't feel empty. I stood there for a long time, coffee cooling in my hands, trying to name the feeling he left behind. Later, lying in bed, I could still see the look in his eyes, that small pause before he said goodnight, that almost smile. It shouldn't have meant anything. He was my dad's best friend. He'd known me since I was a kid. But the way he looked at me, it wasn't the way you look at someone you're supposed to protect. It was the way you look at someone who's become unexpectedly visible. And that night, as the city hummed softly outside, I realized that maybe I wasn't the only one haunted by the past. Maybe he was too, and maybe, In some quiet way we were both trying to find something still alive in it. It had been a week since Mark fixed the kitchen light. A week of quiet mornings, the smell of coffee I made for one, and the faint memory of him still hanging in the air. I told myself I wouldn't wait for a knock on the door, but every sound in the hallway made me look up. Friday evening, the rain started again. Light at first, then heavier, drumming against the fire escape. I was halfway through takeout noodles when I heard it, 3 short knocks. When I opened the door, Mark stood there holding a brown paper bag, rain in his hair. "Thought you could use real food," he said. Inside the bag were groceries, pasta, tomatoes, fresh basil. Things that actually needed cooking. "You didn't have to do that," I said, smiling despite myself. He shrugged. "Didn't feel like eating alone." That was how it started. We cooked together, the windows fogging with steam and laughter. He chopped while I stirred. He teased me for holding the knife wrong. I accused him of seasoning like a man from a cooking show. When we finally sat down, the rain was louder, a kind of music in the background. The lights flickered once, but we ignored it. "This place suits you," he said, watching me across the table. "I'm not sure I suit it," I admitted. "Feels like I'm just borrowing the space." He nodded slowly. "It'll start feeling like yours when you stop asking for permission to live in it." The words hit harder than he probably meant them to. My dad's shadow had always filled this apartment. I wasn't sure how to live in it without feeling like an intruder. We finished dinner, washing dishes side by side. Every time our hands brushed in the soapy water, I felt a spark I couldn't name. It wasn't romantic in the way movies show it. It was quieter, deeper, something that made my chest ache. When the power went out, we both froze. A sudden flash of white from the streetlight, then darkness. "Well," he said, "guess we're old-fashioned tonight." I found 2 candles in a drawer. He lit them, and for a moment, his face glowed gold. Shadows gathered along his jaw, soft and warm. "Still hate storms?" he asked. I nodded before I could stop myself. "Always have." He moved closer, voice low. "They can't hurt you here." Lightning cracked. Instinctively, I flinched. His hand found my shoulder, steady, firm. The touch lingered. His thumb brushed lightly as if tracing a thought he wasn't saying aloud. The thunder rolled and we both exhaled at the same time. When I turned toward him, he was still looking at me, that same quiet look from the other night. The one that stayed in my head too long. "You okay?" he asked. "I think so," I whispered. We didn't move. The candlelight danced between us. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, could see the reflection of the flame in his eyes. There was a tenderness there, not reckless or forbidden, just honest. When the lights came back on, he dropped his hand like it had burned him. "Guess the storm's done," he said, smiling quickly. "Yeah." He slipped his jacket on. The silence between us was different now, not empty but full. At the door he paused. "You should keep those candles out. Just in case." "I will." He didn't leave right away. His hand rested on the door frame, knuckles pale. "Eli." I waited. He shook his head lightly. "Never mind." The door clicked shut. I stood in the kitchen long after he was gone, the smell of rain drifting in through the open window. I could still feel the warmth of his hand on my shoulder, still hear the way my name sounded when he said it. I told myself it was nothing, a reflex, comfort between old family friends. But deep down I knew. It was too close to be nothing. Too careful to be an accident. And when I went to bed that night, I didn't dream of storms. I dreamed of candlelight and the look on his face when he told me I was safe. After that night, we didn't talk for days. I told myself it was fine, that maybe we both needed distance, that maybe what I'd felt under that storm light had been just gratitude, confusion, grief twisting itself into something it wasn't. But silence has a way of growing roots. It filled the apartment, the halls, even the air between our doors. Every time I heard footsteps in the corridor, my heart betrayed me. And every time they passed without stopping, I felt something tighten. Then one evening as I came home from work, I found an envelope slipped under my door. No name on it, just a small, careful fold. Inside was a photograph. Me and my dad at the lake years ago. I was maybe 8, perched on someone's shoulders. Mark's. The sun behind us, his arms steady around my legs, both of us laughing. I stared at it for a long time, the air catching in my chest. It shouldn't have meant as much as it did. But somehow it felt like he was saying he remembered too, not just my father but me. I didn't think, I just went down the hall and knocked. When he opened the door he looked surprised, and a little relieved. "Eli." His voice was softer than I remembered. "You got it." "I did," I said. "You kept this all this time?" He nodded. "Your dad sent me a copy." I found it the other day, thought you should have it. I held it out between us. It's strange. I barely remember that day. He stepped aside, gesturing for me to come in. Then let me remind you. His apartment was quiet, warm. The faint smell of cedar and aftershave. A small record player hummed in the corner, low jazz filling the silence. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed me one. Your dad took that picture just before you fell into the water? He said with a small laugh. I grinned, shaking my head. I remember that part. I cried for an hour. You were furious at me, he said, smiling. You told me I ruined your favorite sneakers. They were light-up sneakers, I said, laughing quietly. I think I actually believed the world ended that day. Yeah. His expression softened. Your dad teased me for weeks about it. We fell silent then, the kind of silence that doesn't demand to be filled. He just sits there waiting. After a while I spoke. I didn't realize how much of him you still carry. He looked down at his drink. He was my best friend for 20 years. You don't unlearn that overnight. I nodded. Sometimes I wonder if I ever really knew him the way you did. Mark set his glass down, eyes meeting mine. You knew him differently. He used to talk about how much you reminded him of himself at your age. He worried he hadn't done enough to tell you that. I felt a lump form in my throat. He didn't have to. Maybe not, he said gently. But people like us always think we have more time. The words lingered. I looked at him, really looked. His face in the low light was both familiar and new, like a story I'd heard 100 times but never truly listened to. When my eyes started to sting, I turned away. He noticed. Without saying anything, he reached across the small space between us and placed his hand over mine. Warm. So. For a moment I couldn't move. The touch wasn't bold, it was hesitant, almost reverent. The kind of gesture that asks rather than takes. I miss him too, he said quietly. I nodded. It's strange how grief can feel like company when someone else shares it. He smiled faintly. Maybe that's what keeps people close. Not just love, the things they lose together. We sat like that for a long time, the weight of our hands a small, steady bridge between 2 kinds of loneliness. Outside, the city went on, sirens, wind, faint echoes of life that didn't care about ours. When I finally stood, the photograph still in my other hand, I said, "Thank you for remembering him with me." He stood too, walking me to the door. "You don't have to do this alone, Eli." "I know," I said. "But sometimes I don't know what to do instead." He nodded. "Then start with dinner sometime." No reason. Just, dinner. I wanted to say yes right then, but the words caught. "I'll think about it," I whispered. He smiled, the kind of smile that meant he already knew my answer. When I got back to my apartment, I placed the photograph on my desk. I kept glancing at it while brushing my teeth, while turning off the lights, while lying in bed with the city buzzing outside. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the same thing. Not the photograph, not the lake, but his face when he said he missed him too. There was something in that silence, something that hummed beneath words, beneath logic. Something that made me feel seen in a way I hadn't in years. And that night, for the first time since my dad died, I didn't feel completely alone. The days after that night blurred into one long stretch of quiet. Mark and I kept finding reasons to see each other. Dinner, a broken shelf, a movie I hadn't watched that he insisted I borrow. None of it was planned, but none of it was accidental either. I told myself we were just filling the space my dad left behind. That this was what people did when they shared loss. But every time I caught him looking at me, something inside me trembled like a string pulled too tight. One afternoon, I was fixing a shelf in the hallway closet when the hammer slipped and the edge of the board caught my hand. It wasn't deep, just enough to sting and bleed. I muttered under my breath, heading for the bathroom, but before I could wrap it in a towel there was a knock on the door. When I opened it, Mark was standing there holding a toolbox. Heard something drop. "You all right?" I tried to wave him off, but he saw the towel and frowned. "Let me look." "It's nothing," I said. "Let me see, Eli." His tone left no room for argument. I held out my hand, feeling slightly foolish. He took it carefully, thumb brushing the inside of my wrist as he examined the cut. His hands were warm, calloused in the way people's hands get when they've built things their whole lives. "It's not bad," he said quietly. "Just needs cleaning." He led me to the kitchen sink, turning on the tap. The sound of running water filled the small space. He cleaned the cut with careful precision, his fingers steady even when I winced. "There," he murmured, wrapping a small bandage around it. "See? Nothing a little care can't fix." I looked at our hands, his holding mine, the bandage between us, and something shifted again. He noticed the stillness but didn't let go. "Thank you," I said softly. He met my eyes. You don't have to thank me for that. The silence stretched. His thumb moved once, absently, across my knuckles. Just enough to make me catch my breath. There was no music, no storm, no reason for the world to stop, and yet it did. He looked at me like he was memorizing something he wasn't supposed to remember. I felt my pulse against his hand, quick, uneven. Mark, I started, but the rest caught in my throat. He exhaled slowly, the sound low and tired. You shouldn't look at me like that, he whispered. I wasn't. Yes, you were. His voice broke just slightly. And I keep letting you. Neither of us moved. His fingers still cradled mine. The distance between us had never felt smaller. I don't know what this is, I said. He shook his head. Me neither. He stepped back first, his hand sliding away. I felt the absence instantly, sharp as the sting of the cut. I should go, he said, before I make this harder than it already is. Mark? He stopped in the doorway, one hand on the frame, the other curled at his side like he didn't trust it. If I stay, he said quietly, I won't be able to pretend anymore. And then he was gone. The apartment felt suddenly too big. I sat on the counter for a long time, staring at the small white bandage on my hand. It was such a simple thing, a touch meant to help, but it carried everything we hadn't said. That night I tried to read, to watch something, to sleep. None of it worked. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, the hesitation, the weight of everything we were trying not to feel. I replayed the moment over and over, wondering if I'd done something wrong, or if maybe this was just what happens when you step too close to someone you were never meant to see in that way. But under the confusion there was something else, something quiet, certain. That touch hadn't been a mistake. It had been a confession neither of us knew how to voice. And no matter how hard I tried to shake it, I could still feel it. The warmth of his hand around mine, the tremor in his breath, the way he said my name like it was a secret. The touch stayed long after he left. For 2 weeks I didn't see him. The hallway outside my door stayed empty. The hum of his record player never drifted down the corridor. Every night I told myself it was better that way, easier to breathe without wondering what another glance might mean. But breathing didn't feel any easier. One morning, a soft sound broke the stillness, paper sliding against the floor. Another envelope. Inside, a single note. I'm sorry for walking away. Some things scare me because they matter too much. The handwriting was firm but uneven, as if he'd hesitated with every line. I read it again and again until the words blurred. Then I put on my jacket and walked down the hall before I could think better of it. He opened the door almost immediately, like he'd been waiting. Eli. My name left him like a sigh. I held up the note. You left this. He nodded once. I didn't know if I should. I think you already did, I said. He smiled faintly, eyes tired. Come in. The apartment was dim, curtains half drawn, the faint smell of coffee in the air. He looked different, quieter, as if he hadn't slept. I shouldn't have left like that, he said. He stopped, rubbing the back of his neck. I didn't trust myself to stay. I took a step closer. You don't have to keep pretending this is something we can explain away. He looked up, eyes searching mine. I don't want to hurt you. You're not. I'm your father's friend, Eli. I shook my head. You're Mark. That's who you've always been. That's who I'm talking to right now. The silence between us stretched, the kind that feels like standing at the edge of something vast. He exhaled, a sound halfway between relief and surrender. I keep trying to convince myself that what I feel for you is just memory, that it's him I'm missing through you. But it isn't. I felt the words hit, slow and heavy. Then what is it? He smiled sadly. It's you. It's this. He didn't move closer, not yet. He just looked at me, letting the truth sit there, quiet and fragile. I reached out first. My fingers brushed his wrist, barely touching, but he didn't pull away. The warmth of his skin was grounding, a small reminder that whatever this was, it existed in the real world, not just in the spaces between words. I don't need you to call it anything, I said. I just need it to be honest. He nodded slowly, eyes glistening. Honest, he repeated like he was testing the word. We stood in the middle of the room, city sounds faint beyond the glass. A bus, someone laughing far below, life going on. When he finally stepped closer, it wasn't dramatic. Just a simple, natural movement until we were sharing the same breath. His forehead rested against mine, a quiet press that said more than any confession could. Neither of us spoke. The silence was full, of every look, every moment we turned away and come back again. After a while he whispered, I don't know what this becomes. I smiled. Then maybe we don't need to yet. He let out a soft laugh, the sound small and real. You make it sound easy. It's not, I said. But it feels right. He nodded once, closing his eyes. I felt the tremor in his breath when he said, I didn't expect you. I didn't expect you either, I said. But I'm glad it's you. We stayed like that until the city outside began to lighten, gray clouds giving way to pale gold. There was no grand ending, no fireworks, just two people standing quietly, learning what it meant to stop running from themselves. When I finally pulled back, he caught my hand, thumb brushing the bandage that had long since healed. Does it still hurt? He asked. Not the cut, I said. He smiled, small, knowing. Good. I helped him make coffee, the two mugs side by side on the counter. The rhythm felt almost domestic, the soft sound of the kettle, the light spilling across the floor. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. When I left later that morning, the hallway smelled faintly of rain again, though the sky was clear. I turned once before closing the door behind me. He was still there, leaning in the doorway, watching quietly, not the way he had before, not with confusion or restraint, but with something open, steady. Back in my apartment, I sat by the window with my mug, looking out at the city that was suddenly less lonely. I thought about my father, about the years that shaped us, about how people carry love in so many forms, some expected, some not. And then I thought of Mark, of the way his hand had steadied me, the way his silence had held 1,000 words neither of us had known how to say. I didn't know where it would go. I didn't need to. Because sometimes love doesn't arrive with clarity or promises. It arrives in the quiet, in the glance that lingers, in the note slipped under a door. It arrives when you stop pretending you don't already feel it. He was my dad's best friend. I didn't ask for this, didn't see it coming. But when I met his eyes, I understood. Love doesn't always arrive when it should. But when it finally does, you don't turn it away.